Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Welcome back to the Reclaim Leader podcast. It is so good to be back with everyone again. We're in this series that Jesse, whenever we start talking vision, I don't know, we kind of light up a little more.
Yeah.
We don't even need all the Christmas lights. We are lit up when it comes to talking about mission, vision, strategy. And I think now's the time, as we talked about last week, now's the time to at least start giving it a little bit of headspace, even in the midst of all the holiday stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's what really kind of gets you going for the new year.
Yeah, I think so. And I think actually I found, in as much as December's crazy and we're cranking through a bunch of stuff and we're getting ready, like there is space in there for us to kind of start dreaming ahead. It's kind of how we're wired as leaders, I think. And you know, this is probably true for a lot of our listeners too. You can't help but thinking about January and beyond, and maybe just finding some intentional time to give space to that actually kind of gives you a break from the grind of the season in this life-giving way. At least that's the hope. And I found that to be true for myself.
Yeah, I found, so the other day I did yours and mine favorite thing because I was really feeling scattered.
Yeah.
And I went to the Starbucks that has the nice lobby or the nice seating area. And I sat there for about an hour and a half with a notebook, computer closed, everything closed, phone on do not disturb. And I just sat there and just kind of scribbled in the journal. And I got to tell you, it was so helpful. Every time I do it, I'm like, I'm so glad I did that.
What's your drink of choice when you're sitting there?
Right. It's always the same. I'm a dark roast guy. I just go dark roast coffee. I'm very boring. I order the same thing every time. But
it's good. It's that comforting thing that it's like, for me, if I need something like that, I don't usually do lattes, but a nice vanilla latte is like,
that's nice.
Just a little bit of sweet. But yeah, having that notebook, there's something, you know, in the old days when we had to defragment our computers. Do you remember that whole thing?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I don't know. Am I supposed to be doing that still? I don't know.
Probably. I don't know.
But it kind of has that effect, doesn't it? It does. You're processing, you're writing, things are dumping out of your brain. And it's kind of ordering your thoughts, maybe taking some things out that you don't have to worry about anymore. I don't know. Just it's a life-giving thing. So if you haven't done that in a while, give yourself the excuse and take an hour and a half and go find your coffee of choice and sit there, see what happens.
Yeah. And it's so let these next couple of weeks, let this series be a little bit of a defrag, a little bit of allowing you some space to think about where you're hoping or where you're feeling God's wants to take your church in the new year.
Yeah.
So, and really it's about, well, how do you find out what God is asking you to do? That's kind of baked into this process. Before we go on, just want to encourage you to do us a favor and share this episode with a friend or leave us a review on your platform of choice. It helps us to continue to help more pastors. And that's really what we are passionate about. So thank you so much. And thank you for listening. I know that there's like 1 million podcasts and I listened to several, and I hope that this is one that's really helps you and is practical enough to give you some ideas to move forward, because it's in everyone's best interest that we all have healthy churches.
Yeah, so much, so true. And we have a lot of words, Jason. We say a lot. But every so often there's a nugget in there from our experience working in the trenches in the local church. And so, you know, that's what we're hoping you're finding some of that gold along the way, in the midst of our kind of processing through our own churches and leadership and all that.
Yeah, there's some gold mixed in there with the pyrite, right? Okay.
That's right.
So last week, if you didn't listen to last week's episode, you may want to stop and go back and listen to that first. If you decide to trudge on anyway, because it's kind of a pain to switch episodes right now, that's fine. Quick review. We just talked a bit about how when it comes to vision, we need to be a bit more like Disney Imagineers rather than bookkeepers. Like, we need to develop organizational vision. And that's what happens when you combine creative imagination with practical processes.
Yeah.
And usually depending on what sort of leader you are, what sort of church you're in, you struggle with one of the two more than the other. So maybe for some of you, it's you're having a hard time being imaginative about what could be. And it could be that either you're not a vision person or you are a vision person, but you are so wrapped up in the day-to-day, you feel like you don't have time to go to the coffee shop with a pad of paper, right? You feel like you're just swamped. So we talked a bit about that, about how do you work on vision from both sides? Because you actually need both. Mm-hmm. You need the vision, you need the creative imagination, the dreaming, but you also need processes. And you can get to your vision goals through both or through either side of it, but it's most effective when you have both.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's spot on. And so I think that's where we get traction and actually see vision implemented, is when those things come together. So we want that. And yet to get the ball rolling sometimes is tough. And one of the big obstacles sometimes is thinking about how are we going to pay for this thing, Jason? Yeah. How are we going to pay for it? Because that's one of the questions I get a lot in the church. I hear that from pastors and church leaders too. Yeah, that's all well and good, but where do we get the resource for that?
Yeah, on some level, we're all wondering that. And you may have a big vision in front of you, a big dream for next year, and you feel like, I would love to take a swing on this dream, but I don't know if it's responsible based on what our financial situation appears to be.
Yeah.
I don't know how much is like, we should just have more faith and we should roll with it, or, we need to count the cost at the same time. It's a tension that you have to figure out. But I think if you put together a healthy budget building process, I think this is what gets you there. Because one of the things that happens in ministry is a similar thing that happens in businesses. Usually businesses fail not because of a lack of inventory or because they have a bad product. It's a lack of capital. Mm-hmm. They don't have enough to keep the product, the widgets, if you will, on the shelves. So budget has always been part of ministry. And, we were just doing a series on Romans, in a sermon series on Romans. And, Paul always asking for money, to support him in his ministry. He's hoping to go to Spain, and, what a whole new world that would have been for him to do. And it's just a reality that we have to face. And I know that, Jesse, I didn't go on to the pastorate to talk about money. I really didn't.
Yeah.
But I had to learn that it's an important part of the conversation if we're hoping to achieve what we think God wants us to achieve.
Yeah, it's part of the reality of it. And actually, I was just, before we hit recorder, talking about a meeting I had last night with our leadership team, our session. And part of the conversation was, what is our approach to our budget going to be? And what is our approach to how we talk about fundraising, how we talk about giving, how we invite the congregation to be a part of that? And we just really sat with that for a while and thought about, how are we communicating about this really crucial, essential piece? Church doesn't just happen. People give, and they practice that spiritual discipline. And how do we help people do that? And then what's our approach to our budget in the midst of all that? So for me, this is a really relevant conversation. I know you guys are on a little different budget cycle, Jason, with your June to June budget. But yeah, this is part of all of our work. And it's not why we went to ministry, and we didn't have this class in seminary. At least I missed that day.
I didn't have that one. Yeah.
So we're kind of figuring it out as we go a lot of the time. And, so we're going to be talking about some of that today.
Yeah. So the truth is, lasting change is about having the right systems, and your budget plays a huge part of accomplishing that vision. And, it's sort of like, the old Star Trek, right? And Mr. Scott, I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. She can't take much more of this, And I always wondered, why don't you just build a more powerful engine?
Yeah, that's right.
It can never take it.
Yeah.
But this is what happens if you have the wrong system for your budgeting process, is it will never expand to meet the vision. Mm-hmm. It will never support it. For example, here at Tower Hill, when I first got here, it was never really a church that was built on pledge cards. I served in plenty of churches that were.
Mhm.
And there's always so much anxiety over the pledge cards determining how we build our budget. Now, when I came here, they really didn't, they tried to use pledge cards, but people weren't really into them for one reason or another, which made it almost impossible to build a budget because we had nothing to kind of base it on other than, well, last year people gave this amount. And so let's anticipate a 1% or 2% congregational increase. And our process was, okay, we have our line items of all the different things that we must pay for, buildings and grounds, personnel, right? Children's ministry, youth ministry, discipleship, all the different categories. And we got to pay for all these things. And everybody gets their budgets. And the process was this. It was our treasurer would give our elders a copy of last year's spreadsheet alongside of a blank spreadsheet, and they're supposed to fill in what they think they need for the following year. And every single time, it was like the same exact buckets, the same exact numbers plus 5%.
Yeah.
And even if they didn't spend all their budget, which, by the way, it becomes like a feeding frenzy at the end of the year because, oh my gosh, we got to spend our budget. Otherwise we won't get more, which tell me how that makes any sense. But that's how people think, because they're like, well, the amount of budget I get and whether or not I get an increase is a reflection of how much we're valued. And then it becomes all about, if I'm valued, then they're going to give us the budget ask that we ask for. And This is what's called an entitlement budget. I'm entitled to this much because we got this much last year, and this is what it looks like with interest, if you will. Obviously, this is going to be a big barrier in moving forward. It's sort of like a mental block because most churches don't even realize you could do it a different way. And I hear the excuses I used to give with this is, I don't really know budgeting. It's the model that I inherited. I know it doesn't work great, but hey, we're Presbyterians, It's something's better than nothing. Or, hey, I don't really have the energy to tackle this, change the whole way we do a budget. So let's just make the most of it. Those strategies are okay, but again, they won't actually get you where you want to go. For example, I can't tell you how many churches I've seen and I have been a part of that have said, maybe it's a church that doesn't have a huge budget, but a decent budget, like let's say $250,000 a year or something, or $300,000 a year, which is, for some churches, that sounds like a lot. For other churches, it sounds like nothing. But let's say, $250,000 a year budget, and the church is like, you know what? We've got no young people in this church, and we've got to figure it out. And our vision is we're going all in with the next generation, all in with youth ministry. We need to hire a youth person part-time. We need to get some program. We really need to put our chips in the middle. And you look at their line item budget and they max out, it's $1,500 of a $250,000 budget. And you're saying you're all in. That's the thing you feel God's calling you to do. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
You're just never going to get there because there's no room to grow that thing because all the money's already accounted for.
Yeah, it's hard because there are real things that we need to pay for and we want to support, and some things have been really meaningful in the life of the church, but so there's some hard discernment that needs to happen. That can be tough because probably we're going to step on some toes and some different things, but there is an approach that I think can help us to move out of that and to create some more margin for dreaming big and moving out of a scarcity mindset or what we have left over we'll put toward that mindset. Because if you have that, there's never going to be quite enough to really go in the direction of a dream. So how do we do it, Jason? I mean, how do we change our mindset? I mean, we got a whole community of people that have been budgeting a certain way for as long as the church has been there, or whatever. So what's some pivots that you guys have made? How do we move towards a healthier approach?
Yeah. So what we discovered was we had to get out of this entitlement budget trap because entitlement budgets cause division. Mission budgets, on the other hand, cause multiplication.
Mhm.
If you are able to say, here's the idea that we had. We said, okay, look, what if we just started all over again? If we were a brand new church and we had all these realities in front of us, what would we do? What do we feel God's calling us to do? We started with vision, which is, I think, the right place to start. And then you allow your budget to be informed by the vision, not the other way around. The vision isn't determined by the size of your budget. It's determined first, and then you build the budget around it.
Mhm.
So a mission budget will help you focus on what God is calling you to do. So you ask, what's the big vision? Let's allot our best resources for it. I mean, think about it. Why wouldn't you put your best people, your best resources
Mhm.
on what you think God's calling you to do the most?
Hmm.
Now, the reality is, like you said, there's only so much money to go around. And most of us who have church buildings, aging church buildings, that's a huge like albatross. That's like a huge chunk of the budget that is sort of out of our control, unless we decide to just kind of blow the whole thing up and we're going to go and be a portable church, which is not a very good idea. But you know, so you may not be able to just take all the money off the table and be like, okay, let's put $248,000 on the next generation, right? Well, you're also you can make the argument that your personnel costs are part of that vision, because those are the people that are going to be help steering that. And personnel costs are more than ever. We were just talking about this, Jesse.
Yeah.
We're definitely north of 70% of our budgets toward personnel, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago, someone's like, if your budget's over 50% personnel, you're in trouble. I'm like, well, we're in trouble.
We're in trouble. We've been in trouble for a while. Yeah.
Like, I don't know what to do.
Different ministry landscape for sure.
So here's the way that we have been working with this new way of building a budget. And that is, we think about our vision. We think, what's God calling us to do? What's the one thing God wants us to do? Let's make sure we rearrange our resources and push them toward that thing.
Yeah.
So for us, we thought going into this year, it's how are we going to go all in on engagement? How are we engaged? We have lots of new people. How are we going to engage them in the life of the church? And that's a big question for like discipleship, spiritual formation. How are we going to do that? Yeah. And so we made sure that we actually reoriented our staff and teams around our spiritual formation or discipleship model, which all we did was pretty much adapt it for North Point like we do everything else. We went neighborhood foyer, living room, kitchen as, you know, the house of the church with the mission in the middle. How are we bringing people along this flywheel to engage them in and create disciples?
Right.
And so that was our first thought when we were thinking about budgeting. Now, it doesn't mean we had tens upon tens of thousands of dollars to put there, but it was the first thing that we talked about budgeting, and it ended up getting way more than if we thought of it as a leftover. Do you see what I mean? So even when you put the budget side by side, they might look very similar in the end. But the point is, we think vision first. Yeah. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reorientation to first things first, right? So even if you end up with a budget that, if for all intents and purposes, if somebody went side by side there, like you did what we used to do, basically, but you're not. Well, actually, we're thinking in terms of all those resources are pointed towards our vision. So that children's team or children's budget, it has, for us, it was creating more sort of landing spots for our new guests. So events and different things where people could go, okay, this is something I can go to deepen my connection here. And so part of our children's team this year is they did a series of kind of service-oriented events that we could invite people to. So building lunches for the Tacoma Rescue Mission and doing some other things like that. But so the children's budget was still there, but it was oriented into this vision. And we set aside additional resources to help them do that with staff hours and some other things. So the budget might look similar, but it's steering towards that vision. And by starting with the vision, it's helping everybody get on the same page about where are we going this year and what are all these resources for? It's not just to do what we did last year. It's to move towards the thing that God is calling us to now and next.
Well, and then here's what it does. It encourages congregational giving, because now you're talking about what's the big thing God wants us to do. You're sharing that with the congregation and you're inviting them to participate in the mission, which is different than filling out a pledge card. So we don't do pledge cards or anything like that. But what we do is we talk about life transformation. We talk about the stories of how God is showing up in people's lives. We do immersion baptism in our baptism tank during the worship service, and people are moved by seeing that experience. We share stories of faith, and in the end, we say, "Then will you join us in this mission?" Now, let me just share with you a couple of numbers. So we made this big shift to a mission budget right in the middle of 2020.
Good timing.
Yeah. Yeah. We'd been talking about it, and we put in a lot of work in late 2019. So the road was already paved, but we still had to decide to drive on it. And here's the result. Since 2020 and now, we have increased our budget by $400,000. We had a smallish capital campaign, or it might be big to some, but small compared to other campaigns we've done, of $610,000 we raised on top of that for facilities for our youth spaces. We increased 200 members, kind of the all-in number since then. So, we lost a lot, gained a lot, and about 300 worshipers a week. And I believe there's a direct correlation between the accomplishment of that vision and the way we strategize how to build our budget, because it's all based on getting people excited to buy into the mission, which is different than, and I think it's generational a little bit, Jesse. I think that younger generations, or let's say our generation and younger especially, they give more by being inspired to give. By seeing, Sarah McLachlan and the Puppies. I'm just kidding, but that's it. The giving is based on emotions a little bit. We give emotionally, and we give in chunks. Although we're huge fans of recurring giving, and we try to get everybody on board with that.
Yeah.
But when you can figure that out, and if you build the whole thing around what's God's doing in people's lives, people are excited to give. Yeah. We had a shortfall at the end of our fiscal year last year, and it was a big one because we had a really aggressive budget. I think it was something like 10% increase in congregational giving we were planning on for that year. It was sort of an insane idea, and we were only about, I think we were $60,000 short, which in the end is actually a pretty small number. And we had a big ask at the end, hey, help us close the gap.
Yeah.
And they did. And I had somebody email me and say, thank you so much for letting us know of the need.
Yeah.
It was our pleasure to give to it. I'm like, what?
Yeah. That was our conversation with my leadership team last night, is that when we're clear about the need and the opportunity, and tell the stories of what God's doing, people want to be a part of that. And I think sometimes it's that the inspiration piece is maybe the beginning of the journey toward the more spiritual discipline of giving that the older generation has, right? Yeah. How do you get the ball rolling? One of our amazing folks, we met her here before, Allie Cullinane, was our preschool director for a long time. She's moved on to start like 4 other businesses, and she's crushing it out there. But she said, sometimes you just got to get someone to do it the first time. And then the buy-in starts to begin, and then the habit begins, and then the discipline grows. And that inspiration piece, that story piece that you're talking about, the vision mission piece, is what helps people to take that step.
Yeah.
They're not just here to babysit somebody else's old thing and keep it alive. No, this is something new that I'm a part of that's growing and developing. So, one of the, I don't know how you guys make sure that those stories happen, but for me, we had to create a system to ensure that we were highlighting those things.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what your rhythm is. I'll just tell you ours real quick. That first Sunday of the month is communion. So we highlight God's love, God's story there. And then the second Sunday, we highlight an internal ministry and its impact. Sometimes it's about the ministry. Often it's about somebody whose life has been touched or impacted or changed in some positive way because of it. The third Sunday, we talk about our giving. We give thanks to God. We celebrate the fact that we get to participate in God's mission. And that's where we pray for our offering, old school style, bless.
I love it.
And in the fourth Sunday, we do an external ministry highlight. One of the things that we're doing in partnership with our community or community organizations, what is God doing in people's lives or through us? Often it's someone sharing about how God has impacted them as they've served or things like that. So we scheduled it to make sure that it happens, because if it's kind of anecdotal or one-offs, it'll start to fade, because what gets scheduled is what gets done. So that's how we've approached it. But
I think that's an excellent approach. Ours is a little more loose in the sense that it's a feel thing with our leadership team. So every week we talk about, what happened on Sunday, what's happening this coming Sunday, where are we, just kind of up Periscope, what's going on, what are we seeing? And that's usually where we make those decisions in those conversations. So our system is we have a weekly meeting where we talk about it and decide how we're going to do it.
What do we want to highlight? What do we think would be a way to give thanks to God for what he's doing? And I think if you can get out ahead of that a little bit, for me, I need that extra week or two to reach out to that person, set them up for success, make sure they have what they need to do that well. Or sometimes we do it in a video-based way. We had a really awesome story this past Sunday, but it was supposed to be 5 to 7 minutes and ended up being 16 minutes long, right? So, and it was in person and you could just feel it. I mean, it's powerful, so it was worth it. But, there's a little bit of risk involved in doing some of these things. But in the end, I think people probably benefited more from hearing the story than my sermon. So yeah, telling those stories is really a way to celebrate what God's doing, but also get people to go, what we're doing is worth it. Count me in.
Well, it's a reminder too of why we're here. Mm-hmm. We're not just here to nod our heads in agreement with the teachings of Jesus. We're here to be transformed and to help others find Jesus, to be transformed. Like it's life-altering moments with eternal consequences. And I think when you're reminded of, we all need reminding of that, because we get lulled to sleep a little bit by religious habit. And so I think the stories awaken us to God's work in us and around us right now.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so I thought, with budgeting and stuff, that I would just share, just to give some ideas. This is literally what we're doing right now in real time here in December. This is, we have a few different strategic times a year where we help with the budgeting or we have specific asks. This is one of them. So I'll just lay it out for you. This is what we're doing, this is what we do in December. So on the 1st, we launched our end of year campaign. So we had a standalone, we call it Tower Talk. That's our weekly e-newsletter that goes out to everybody. We had a standalone one, and it was a video of me talking about the vision, mission, and how they can participate by giving and the different ways they can give. It's like a minute long. I mean, it's like really short. Then the ask is that they would set up recurring giving. We specifically asked them to set up recurring giving. And one-time gifts are great, but we would love if you could set up recurring giving. And I actually joke, and I'm intentionally funny about it because that seems to get a good response with our people.
Yeah,
I tell them it's so that when you're not here, your money is. Mm-hmm. And they laugh at that. Yeah. And it's just kind of winsome and fun.
Yeah.
But we have very specific, like a training video, like this is how you set it up. This is where you go. It's like sort of an instructional video somebody put together. And then, will you support the mission of Tower Hill financially? And then we have other like mission opportunities, physical mission opportunities for them to do. Yeah. Then on Giving Tuesday, which is the 3rd, we actually have never had success with Giving Tuesday. I think whenever we sent out stuff on Giving Tuesday with like social media stuff, I think our best year we got like $150, which I mean, I don't know. It's like, I guess it's not for churches, or at least not for our church.
I don't think well, maybe it is for some. It hasn't been for us either.
So, but what we tried this year was an email blast again, using recurring giving as a theme. So it's actually, it was sort of clever. Like, we're asking you, don't give today, but set up for recurring giving. Right, because our goal is to increase the recurring giving that we have, and it had a remind video of how to update their recurring giving. So it was something that talked about, hey, if you're already on recurring giving, thank you so much. If you and your family are prayerfully considering increasing that gift, this is how you change the amount.
Yep.
Which actually, it's funny because I was sharing that my family hadn't looked at that in a little while. It's like, oh my gosh, yeah, let's change that.
We need to step up our game too.
Yeah, totally.
Throw yourself in the mix, yeah.
Totally. And then December 8th through 24th is kind of like the open part of the campaign of Christmas giving, where there's PR. We'll announce it from up front. There'll be slides scrolling in the sanctuary. Again, the focus on recurring giving, but this is not a message from the pastor. This is a message from the person doing the welcome, and they talk about giving.
Yeah.
But it's all kind of goes hand in hand. Announcements, slide deck, social media. And then at the very end, we've done this for the last few years. We have a year-end match campaign. We have a very generous donor who says that they'll do a match of the gift. And that is big. Most one-time givers give to the match. They really like it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we get a lot of new givers that way because they like the idea that their money's doubled. I'm giving $10, now it's $20, and it's good. And all of these gifts that we have all month range from $1. We have somebody, Jesse, that gives the church $1 a week faithfully.
That's fantastic.
But like never misses.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something so cool about that.
Yeah. No,
But yeah, so we do a year-end match campaign, and that's our December strategy. That's what we do in December.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing this month. And because December for us, just like probably most churches, it counts for 2 months worth of giving usually.
Yeah,
so we're always trying to.
I think the last couple of years we've been in the 25 to 27% range for November, December giving.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal for a lot of our churches, and it's on people's minds. And so I like what you're doing there. You're giving someone something that they have direct control over.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when we do this part wrong, we talk about what we've spent so far and whatever, and like there's no control over that piece. So by focusing on the giving gap or the opportunity to give, you're talking with people about something that they can do something about. And that's something that we've really learned to do here is we can give a snapshot of where we are year to date with our finances, but the ask needs to be related to something that they can help bring about through their behavior, through their giving, or through their, action. If we're doing a giving tree, they can come and bring a toy. It's something they can do. So we've really oriented our year-end ask around here's where we think we need to be by the end of the year, and here's how far we are away from that. Can you help us close that gap? Kind of like you said. Can you help us get there? And recurring giving, and we present kind of our 4 ways to give, and we talk about those things. And to do it in this clear, normal, non-weird way, I think people go, yeah, this is the church. We know that this is going to be part of that in some way. So let's be healthy about it, but also be clear about the need that is there.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's hopefully, pastors, maybe that's helpful for you as you're thinking about what do we want to do either this month or really anytime during the year, as we think about what's our strategy going to be for helping to build that budget. So hopefully it's helpful. I know probably pastors out there, you got a lot of different things going on with budget building, and might be, if you're not on the calendar year, or even if you are, it might be the last thing you want to think about changing it right now. But keep this in mind as you're thinking about dreaming big for 2025, because your vision's only going to go so far as your budgeting system.
That's right. Yeah. Good stuff, Jason.
All right. So, hey, thanks everyone for listening. Now, next week, Jesse, we're talking more in this lane, and you have one that we're going to be talking about coming up, which is. I
can't wait to share this and really think about it together, Jason. It'll be a collaborative kind of thought process. But what does it look like to get moving so that we can build healthy culture in the church. And I will start with this idea that you can't steer a parked car, and God can't steer a parked life or a parked church. So let's get moving and do some things that
I love it. I love it. All right. Hey, thanks everyone for listening. Ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together.